Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Pass the Noise, the podcast where we have open forum discussions about whatever topic is on our plate or topics on our plate for that week. We certainly invite your input. There'll be a call-in link put in the comment section, and you can feel free to make comments in the comment section. Let us know what's on your mind. Agree, disagree, you have a comment, question, whatever the case may be. We invite your participation. That's what this is. Open forum means anyone can just jump in and just make their thoughts and feelings known. So we thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Elder Michael Hightower, your co-host, joined as always by Apostle T.B. Walker. Apostle, how are you doing this evening?
I am fantastic. A lot to unpack. I mean, you know what we got? I mean, we started out this, we've got the podcast called Pass the Noise. Man, every week we always say there's so much to unpack. We might want to add that as a tagline. So much to unpack. Because there is, there's always so much going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? I mean, you know what? I was looking at the, you see the stabbing of the students in, was it Idaho? Right?
Oh.
Idaho or Iowa? I think it's Idaho.
Yeah.
I know that there were also
so many
school shootings, the school shootings in was it Virginia or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. Does it seem different to you, or does it seem the same? Something about these seem different to me. It seems like there's an escalation of something. I'm not sure what. We've seen school shootings before. We've seen stabbings before.
Sure.
But this seems different to me. I don't know about if it does to you.
It does, and there was another one today. A shooting at a Walmart, and I can't remember where it was, but there's 6 people, I believe, dead. The shooter didn't say anything, just came in, shot the place up. An employee or former employee, actually a manager of some kind, team lead or something. And then he took his own life. It seems like you're just seeing more random, make no sense violence,
right?
From people who are just seemingly ordinary people. And I think it does feel different. I mean, I think in some ways we become known. We did a whole show on gun violence and
right.
sort of the dynamics in there. But this does seem like it's something else, something other than your typical, and that's sad to say that, your typical school shooting, your typical mass shooting. It's just like these seem to be happening more and more, and it seems like it's enough people. Just like people, are horrified, but it doesn't right. enough people to where anything's being done. Does that make sense? Like there's something in this weird in between place where it's like 6 people got shot. That's terrible. I think it was 15 at the nightclub, something like that, or was it 5?
Right.
Or something. It was less than 20. I believe. Just enough that people, hold their heads and and anchors on TV, emoting and whatnot.
Right.
But not enough where any action is taking place. So I think it's weird. It's a weird place to be, but that is exactly where we are.
You know what? I think some of it is what you started out talking about, the random nature of what's going on. I mean, in some ways, the devils, if you will, that we were dealing with were devils that we knew. We understood certain situations. This happened to this guy. We're not agreeing with it, but
right.
I see it. That's bad. He's got to deal with that. But I see that. This is some guy who's he's kicked off the team and he's been bullied. Mm-hmm. It's not right, but we understand it. I think we're kind of moving into a point where there is just more and more of these that don't make any real sense to us at all. Right. They don't help us. They don't help us to move the whole thing forward in any way, shape, or form. And I think for me, that's the struggle.
Yeah, and to your point, it's so easy nowadays to get a weapon or to get something, and it seems like, and this has been happening, but it seems like more like things that you might have a fist fight about, you might talk, get in somebody's face. Now people are dying, right? He pushed me in the hallway. He talked to some girl that I liked. Did some other beef or some other perceived slight. Now, if you slight me, you don't know what's going to happen. I might just come back to school or the job with the gun and just start shooting the place up. The guy from Virginia apparently was a former football player, knew the guys that he killed. I mean, there's something about that that's sort of like the things that people used to, I think the things that people used to think, like, I'm so mad I could go in there and just tear the place up. Now people are doing it. Now they're doing the thing that they used to think, but that's too crazy. Like, even I'm mad, but I'm not that mad, right? I mean, we've all been mad. Other people would be like, I would love to go in there and just like bash their head against the wall, but you didn't do it. you went home.
Right,
You
right, right.
still mad, but you're thinking about it, but you didn't do it. Now people are just like, I'm going to smash that against the wall. And they do it.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, again, I think it was just that in understanding why they wanted to smash somebody's head against the wall.
Right.
I think we understood. We didn't agree, but we understood the reasons. Right. Now, the more and more things go on, there's nothing in this person's past that indicates that. There's no reasons that we can see. We look for the bullying. We look for all the telltale signs. And I think what we're seeing is that it's changing. And some of these, the random nature really speaks to, I think, the nature and the heart of people now. That there is danger all around us that is really about things that we really have no control of. Students don't recognize that, that there's an anger issue because it's not manifested in the way that it used to be. We look for the kid who's, cowering in the corner and he's like a ticking time bomb, but it's really the kid that's a part of the team. It's the kid who made the team now, right? It's the person who's the cheerleader, right? It's it. You didn't like you, we didn't dislike you. You're kind of in the middle, a neutral. There's a gazillion of you guys. Why would we think you'd be a powder cake? But I think that's the change. Yeah.
I mean, we'll see as time continues on, but it's a very weird place to be in, and it feels strange and it feels different. And so I don't know. So I mean, we'll see. Keep an eye on it for sure. Who knows? Maybe we'll do another show or something on it, on this new trend. But yeah, definitely something going on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so tonight our main topic, if you will, probably be our only topic because it's as you mentioned. I know we say this every week. This is so big, and I'm going to back it. But this is really the case because we're going to talk about Confederate monuments, Confederate monuments, which is a big topic because we're not going to talk about the monuments, but we're also going to talk about monuments just generically. Like why do we build statues? Why do we build plaques? Why do we hang these things up in state houses and this place and that place? Why do we do that? Like, what do we get out of that we are compelled to do it? Because we're all compelled to do it. I mean, there's a statue for everything. There's a statue outside of Lincoln Financial Field of Doug Peterson and Nick Foles. I mean, we just build. This is what we do. We just build statues and stuff. The stuff that happens. It's sometimes just to remember, but there are other reasons as well. We'll get into all that, but it's a strange, almost like an obsession we have with immortalizing, although you can't really do that, historical figures, like making them something that they're always around, they're always sort of in our face, and they're always they're always there. But through the course of this discussion, I think we're going to be getting to a lot of U.S. history because you can't really understand the Confederacy out of its context. Like, it's because we're human and we need, time is time for us, pass is fast, pass is slow based on perception. We need spaces and times that we can remember stuff or you associate with something else. And so you just lift the Confederacy up out of the history of American history, and it makes no sense. Like, there's a reason why the state succeeded. I mean, there's a reason why there was a civil war. There's a reason why there was so much mistrust between, the states and whatnot. So there's a reason for that. And I think we have to discuss those reasons in a historical context in order to really understand why we have these statues and monuments and what we should do now. Which, I mean, now they're here. So what should we do with them now that they're here and they're among us? Like, what's next? Because there seems to be quite a bit of conversation and controversy over these things. So I mean, let's get right to a clip, and then we can talk about some of these issues that we just referenced.
Many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Kind of a non sequitur, really. I mean, to be comparing a Civil War hero to the first president of the United States or to Thomas Jefferson. I mean, clearly Thomas Jefferson and George Washington represent something very different about America. General Lee, on the other hand, represents something that was very much a dark time in American history and something that we're still to this day dealing with the aftermath of. So why glorify it? Ron Christie and Harlan Hill are back with me.
Well, good to see you again, Trish. I'm not thrilled with these statues. I think they represent a dark time in America, the dark stain of slavery. On the other hand, as a student of history, I do understand the importance of not turning our backs on our history. But one problem I have is the moral equivalence the president seemed to draw yesterday between the statue of General Lee and then talking about our first president, George Washington, the great founding father of our country.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with that clip because it sort of crystallized a lot of the issues we have in this country around history and race.
Sure.
And when you don't know history and you try to lift up one historical figure who's obviously problematic against another one because they're more problematic, what you end up with really is for people who know history, is you kind of sound kind of silly. Because here's the issue.
Cherry picking, really.
There is no Civil War without George Washington and Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
They set the Civil
Absolutely.
War in motion. The day that the United States Constitution, the original Constitution, was ratified, the Civil War became inevitable.
Right.
And we forget that they're the reason why racism is embedded in this country. George Washington was the president of the Constitutional Convention. He sat there while they discussed fugitive slave laws, compromises, other things, and people sort of like to pretend that the United States was formed as some kind of pristine entity and freedom and liberty for all and all this kind of stuff. No. When they came together to do the Constitution, colonies, which would become states, already had laws against interracial marriage, dictating what free and enslaved could and couldn't do, couldn't own property, couldn't vote. This is all codified before you even get to that point.
Right.
When they had a chance to fix it then, and they didn't. Instead, they just entered into a bunch of compromises. And whenever you have a compromise, you try to balance the power.
Right.
You're always going to end up in the end with the conflict. It's unavoidable.
Absolutely. And you're totally right there. I mean, I think that it is a natural, we've got certain history heroes in our country. And so it's really natural in some ways for us to cherry pick in the way that we do. This one's okay. That one's not okay. This one, we've got a picture of George Washington crossing the Delaware, right? That's a famous picture, and we see him fighting the redcoats and the insurgents, if you will. So, he does look like a natural hero, but you're totally right. And I think that the problem with it is probably what we memorialize. I don't know if the issue is memorializing. It is what we memorialize. What do you think about what former President Trump said about where does it stop?
So his question is one I have. Like
yes.
What's the criteria for? Because this is, I guess everything we do now will go back to some other episode that we've done since we've done. This is our 20th one. It goes back to cancel culture. Who gets canceled and who doesn't? Who is acceptable? Who's not? Based on some random criteria, right? So now Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, they're out. George Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson, all had issues with race.
Right.
They're in because he's the first president. He's one of our founders. Well, how can you unlink the founder from the Civil War? Like, how do you unlink that in the whole chain of history and say we're taking him out? The Civil War just happened by itself. Like, I don't think the people think of the 3/5 compromise as just a commentary on the way that white people saw the value of black people.
Right.
It was mostly a political compromise that allowed these southern states, in particular Virginia, which had the most slaves, to count slaves as 3/5 of a person.
Right.
For the purposes of presidential electors and representatives in Congress. There's a reason why 4 of the first 5 United States presidents were from Virginia. It's not because there was something in the water. It's not because that's where all the presidential timber was built. Virginia had overwhelmingly political power because of their slave population. That's the reason. So if you try to balance that throughout the years, eventually the juggling act, you're gonna drop one of the balls, right? You can't keep them up in the air forever. At some point, you're gonna have to try to either impose on the slave states the end of slavery, or they're going to agree to it. But the thing is, again, obviously the racial implications of slavery and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The just as big a part was who's going to give up that kind of political power without a fight? Like, who would do that? Like, they fought to get it, they fought to keep it. Why would they just give it up and say, you know what, yeah, let's go, yeah, we're good? Like, that was never going to happen. Like, there's wistful on the parts of the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons of the world. But what's interesting about them is George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, from their 21st birthdays on, they never drew a breath where they were not slave owners.
That's right.
Their entire adult lives. So I don't know how we pull them out and give them a stamp of approval, but other people are like, oh, they're good because they have all these other accomplishments. Now, I'm not here saying they have no accomplishments. I'm not saying he wasn't.
Right.
He was the first president, Jefferson III. They had other things. Highly intelligent. I guess Washington was a good commander, whatever. I'm not qualified to talk about whether or not he was or he wasn't.
Right.
What I'm saying is, his accomplishments aside, there's still huge issues in the way this country was formed, and he's right smack dab in the middle of it.
Absolutely. And so when you look at it, though, I wonder if the issue is history as much as how we view history. You know, I suspect that, what you have is George Washington, and his history is glamorized, right? You got Robert E. Lee, and now there's a different view of that history from a national standpoint, at least now, right? There's a different view of that history. And some of it is because, they were insurrectionists, right? I mean, I think in America, we've kind of come to grips with the fact that, okay, there were slaves here, and, that was a bad thing. And we know that there were people who we revere who had slaves. But we are not necessarily going to deal with the slavery issue as much as we're going to deal with the dividing of the country issue. Right. And I think that's what really is the polarizing effect, is that we are picking and choosing heroes, and I think we've always done it. I don't know that there's ever been a time where we haven't been able to pick and choose, or really kind of looking at history and deciding what history is acceptable and what history is not. I think we're just at a point where we really have to get back to looking at truth and really exposing truth without the glamour. We really don't need to glamorize George Washington. He was our very first president, and that's big and that's major. Sure. But to really have an honest look at each of our historical figures, it really takes for us taking the glamour off. And I think that really being able to look at Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, whoever you want to pick, I think the problem is that we've glamorized it. And I think that as we add glamour to it, you don't want to remove Hitler from the history books because he was pivotal for, from an economic standpoint, he got the country moving in America. The war machine actually helped this country get started. So, what helped in the Depression, World War II, right? Right. So we got the New Deal. Many of those things are there. Now, the question is going to be, do we remove Hitler, or is the issue is that we don't remove, we just don't glamorize him. We just don't lift him up. But we talk about the realness of his life. Sure.
I mean, the facts are the facts, right? I mean, he did what he did. He said what he said. What's interesting is that I'm somewhat of a history buff. I actually started when I was in 6th or 7th grade, and I actually did a report on World War II.
Okay.
And just became really fascinated with not just Hitler's, but the mistakes he made. Toward the end of the thing. It's just, sometimes just history turns on. We waited too long, and now the tanks can't get through the mud and stuff like that. I mean, stuff just human. I mean,
should have attacked the enemy when they were on the run and just let them go.
Exactly. I mean, they had a chance to completely destroy the British Air Force, but decided to bomb London instead as retaliation because the British had accidentally bombed. So stuff like that. It's really fascinating the way that history turns. But Hitler is a historical figure that you cannot remove. If you remove Hitler, how do you explain how the United States rose to prominence? Because the devastation of the world as a result of these world wars is what allowed America to rise. So how would you tell the story without Hitler?
Right. The world was pretty much destroyed, right? Europe was in shambles.
Complete shambles. Europe had to be rebuilt. These other places, Japan. I mean, these countries were like leveled. So, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of things in our history that are not pleasant. Not pleasant, not fun to look at. I'm working on that shameless plug. I'm working on another project having to do with the founding of the country, some other stuff.
Okay.
Some stuff is hard to read. I mean, some stuff regarding slavery and the way Black people were treated. you can only do it for so long before you're like, I need a break from this.
Right,
Just,
right.
it's too much. It's too much. I mean, some of it is just it's horrifying. But we got to be able to look at it and put it into the proper context and say, these are the facts that would happen, and just sort of put it in the context, and so we understand it. Because not understanding is what allows it to sort of happen again in different ways, but
Right.
different but similar ways over and over. Because history does repeat, no matter what people tell you. History actually does repeat, as long as you allow it to. Allow it to keep repeating, and absolutely will repeat. Oh, we have some comments.
Okay.
Clarice.
I kind of thought we would.
Yeah, Ms. Clarice says, what I disagree with is destroying the monument. I think they should be placed in museums instead so that our history is not lost. When a person doesn't know history, we are in danger of repeating history. Agree or disagree?
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree.
Okay.
Now, well, let me just put it this way. I don't think we need monuments to understand history. Right? We don't have a monument to Dred Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no Dred Scott monument, right? But the Dred Scott decision is very serious decision, and it's real. We don't have there were slave uprisings, right? We don't have a monument to Nat Turner, but Nat Turner was a real person, and that really happened, and we study it, right? I don't know that I think the monument is really the issue, because remember, the monuments were really meant to lift up and to glorify. The picture of a conquering hero.
Right.
I don't know that we need a monument of Christopher Columbus knowing what he did, but I don't think we need to remove Christopher Columbus. But if we have a monument of a benevolent Christopher Columbus, for instance, knowing that the truth of the matter is he was not benevolent. He was horrendous to the natives that he found. He enslaved many of them from the very beginning, snatched some of them to bring back with him, killed openly many of them. So the idea that, like, okay, if somebody has a monument to Christopher Columbus, I don't think we need to take that monument that glorifies his actions and put it somewhere to say, well, we'll never be able to talk about him if we don't have this statue of him looking grand or standing over a Native American. We'll never be able to really, really talk about Robert E. Lee unless we see him, with his head on the hand of a hand on the head of a young black boy, offering him, a new lease on life. We have to have that to understand. No way. We don't have any monuments to Genghis Khan, but we study him, right? We know that he existed. I think the monument and what they mean is really the problem. That's what I think the Daughters of the Confederacy, who started so many of this, they designed these monuments for a purpose, to actually lift up this lost cause, if you will. They lifted it up. They lifted up the breaking up of the nation. And so I'm not sure that we need to say, because monuments are for heroes, right? That's kind of how, isn't that really what we designed them for? Traditionally, they're for heroes. And I think once we build a monument, we are co-signing that these people are heroic figures. We don't name schools after people who aren't heroes. Right? I don't know his name.
Right. I mean, yeah.
It's because I'm sure there's not going to be a Tim McVeigh University. Right? I'm pretty sure there won't be. Pretty sure there would not be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So when you look at these school shooters, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to name. There's not going to be a monument, for Dylan Roof, right? So if we don't lift up Dylan Roof, right, and we look and say that was a horrible thing he did, was it worse than Robert E. Lee? Yeah, we're going to still talk about Dylan Roof, right? We're going to talk about Columbine. We're going to talk about all of those things, but should we have a monument to the shooter? Because isn't that what these are?
At the root, I suppose so. At the root, I think you build a statue, you build a monument, you build these things to honor someone. You don't do it to dishonor them. You do it to honor them, bring attention to what they did. And so, yeah, for sure. I would have no issue though with having a museum, the Museum of the Confederacy, where you put all these things there, and if you want to go and learn about the Confederacy, you can go to that museum or whatever. I have no issue with that. I mean, it's just they're here now. I mean, you could destroy them all. I mean, that's obviously an option. But I think there's something, even in seeing the things that we did, like the things that we decided to honor, would be interesting to future generations. Like, they built statues to this guy. Like, I think there's a commentary there that could be helpful to future generations. Maybe not, but I think it's potentially the case. And so I would be for the Confederate Museum, where you put all these things and people can go and do that. I mean, as long as it's not run by the Daughters of Confederacy, as long as it's run by people we're going to get to the Daughters, but as long as it's run by people who are historians and who are going to do things in their proper context, I think that's fine. But I think
like a Holocaust museum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you see it in that vein.
So then, yeah, this is history. This is history. This is what happened. Here's the actors, good and bad. And then you go and you read it. You can read about, if you want to, read about Robert E. Lee. You can read about Jefferson Davis. I think that the thing you would have to have, though, right, is just like you have the Holocaust Museum, a honest revealing of the facts. You can't have a Holocaust Museum and say, well, it kind of didn't happen, or it was their fault, or they did something, they provoked.
Right.
You can't have that. So you got to start with, this was a rebellion. This was an insurrection. This was completely against the Constitution. Like, they completely went haywire. So you got to start with, this was wrong, and this is why they did it, and then you move on from there. But if you're not going to do that, then I think the whole exercise is sort of wasted. Now you're just going to have arguments, which we have now. Right. But you have, here's the monument, you have people on this side, people on that side, and we're just arguing about whether or not it should be there or not. So I think that's not helpful or productive in any way, shape, or form, and it doesn't illuminate history, because now it's just arguments.
Right. Well, you know what, that's kind of, and I understand where you're coming from, and that's I think the thing for me in terms of the monuments is that they don't necessarily illuminate history, right? They actually paint a different picture of history. Now, we could obviously, if the monument was about, hey, look how crazy we were in the early 20th century, late in 19th century. Look how crazy we were. If that's the reason for the museum, yeah, I think that's great. That could work. I'm not sure we need that, though. I'm not so sure we need yeah, look how crazy we were, because history books will do that. Real learning and textbooks will yeah. That might be the real issue.
I think that's an issue.
Down to real history, because if we really get down to real history, we really don't need monuments to be able to say, look how foolish we were. There's so many foolish things we've done in this country that we don't memorialize, right? We don't have a memorial for those things. This one, I think, was a mistake. And we might have to really look at this and realize this was a mistake. This one had no bearing on history. This was designed to rewrite history. I don't know that this really needs to be anywhere else but in the trash heap, because it's not history. Listen, I mean, in the end of the day, it would only be I think a monument or a museum to like our craziness during that time, but it wouldn't illuminate anything about Robert E. Lee.
Well, so the statue itself illuminates nothing. It's just it's like you said, he's hand on hip, looking up, full uniform,
right,
full head of hair, and looking at the sky, whatever. That illuminates nothing. You would have to, and again, I understand when people wouldn't want to do this. You would have to add to these exhibits context. This statue was built in this year, like it was built in 1920 as a result of Reconstruction. Like, you would have to have a whole contextual thing for each exhibit. To just set them up in some building and say, "Come here, look," is no different than having them in the park. Right? You add nothing and you haven't illuminated anything. And I agree that there's an argument to be made that we don't need that. But I think part of the argument, or one of the reason why it may be good to have these discussions, is real history is not being taught. We went through this when we did our thing on CRT. Real history is not being taught. Like, people are being fought tooth and nail to teach anything about slavery.
Right.
Anything about racism, anything about white supremacy in school. So that in and of itself almost makes these things valuable in that sense. So at least you have a conversation about it. Because the conversation's not being had in schools. But it's a crazy way to do it, right? It's a crazy way to have a conversation about it.
Right.
We built this 30-foot monument to this guy who was the president of, basically a president of the Insurrection Club, and we built this 30-foot statue to him. Like,
and we can't get rid of it. I mean, it's so important.
Right.
It's so important to our learning that, you know, we made a statue to insurrectionists, and now we just can't get rid of them because there's, you know, we need them for historical purposes. I just don't, I don't get. I mean, if you make Hitler, if you romanticize him, and there's just this beautiful picture of him looking off to the side with, you know, with a bird on his shoulder, you know, cradling a little newborn baby. I'm not sure. Like, do we need to move that somewhere and say, hey, look, you know, Hitler really didn't actually have a bird on the shoulder, and he really didn't cradle a newborn baby? Why can't we just say that? Why don't our action of tearing down that foolishness and that lie that was told, isn't that really the real action that really historically will be, I think, much more effective, because it rewrites history. And in order for us to talk about real history, don't we need to really tear up the old script?
But who's going to do it? I mean, I think part of I don't disagree with your premise. The issue has been people unwilling to not embrace it. I mean, people unwilling to not embrace that past and saying, no, this is part of our history, this is part of our heritage, this is part of our culture, as if it's part of everything else. Like, it's not like it was an insurrection. Like, they would, you know, fight what they believed in.
Right.
True enough. But
well, that's why I say no museum until we get the history right.
Okay.
Museum, but until we're really ready to be honest about history, I think we just, you know, we just move them from the town square, and we just give them another ornate place to stand. You know, a rotunda, a better place. You know, I mean, just imagine, you know, the rotunda in the, you know, that's there in Washington, D.C. And imagine if those were just all over the different places. And somebody said, let's just put them in one spot and people can walk through, but that will never teach about the truth of history. So what have we really done but placated the very same racists and said, all right. So you were mad about Town Square. Forget Town Square. We've got a better spot for you.
That's a good point. That's well said. That's a good point. Listen, we have a caller. Let's bring in Clarice. Hey, Clarice, how you doing?
Hi.
Hey,
Clarice. I wanted to call in this time because I got my hands full. You know, making that chocolate cake. You know how I do.
I heard that. Sounds good.
No, I get both points. But I think the museum would still open up the conversation about our history, and we can change the narrative then, because, you know, the schools are not doing it, and, you know, a lot of people are arguing about talking about our history and the negative stuff about our history, as if we, like you said, as if we are here, you know, we did a good job when we started. So I think that the museum will help change the narrative and have us talking about the bad stuff that happened in our history. I don't think it needs to be out in the open, but I still do not think that we should have it destroyed, because since we're not talking about it, and then when we are talking about it, we're arguing about it, that taking it away completely will really not open up the conversation to change the narrative. You follow what I'm saying?
I follow what I definitely follow what you're saying. No doubt about it. But I'm not sure that we've got enough issues right now that should open up the door for the discussion, right? We've got real live living right now, 2022 racism that should open up the discussion. I don't think that the monuments have been out in the open since they've been up there, right? Like out in the open, Town Square, right? And people, they didn't start any dialogue. You know, it had the same division. And I'll tell you why. A monument, it was meant to erase history, right? That's what these monuments were designed to do. They were never meant to talk about history. They were really meant to rewrite history. So if we take them somewhere else and they're just rewriting history somewhere else, I think the issue is we can't avoid getting down to the idea that we've got the monuments aren't really our issue. We've got to really begin to teach real history and opening up a conversation where history is still tainted. That's all we're going to have with the, we have a faulty view of history in Charlotte, North Carolina, right? We've got a faulty view of history in Charlottesville, West Virginia. Well, guess what? Put them put them somewhere. Put them anywhere you want. And guess what? Until we change until we really look at the real narrative, we're just going to go there. And there'll be people waving the Confederate flag and saying, man, they took it out of North Carolina. I had to go all the way to Montana to go, but I'm here. And they're going to be waving that same flag, because until we actually get an honest view of history, nothing changes. We really have to go back to really teaching again. And that's not just teaching in schools, but as parents, as leaders, we have an obligation to literally fight against the rewriting of history, or we run the risk of just moving one negative to another place. You know, we don't want crackheads here, so let's move them down to Main Street. Right. So, so of course, where we are right now is pristine because we just pushed them all down the road. But down the road is still messed up because they're there. So we push the racists out and give them another spot somewhere else to be able to hang their hat. What do we really gain?
Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking about how, even our people are down there in the South celebrating and waving their Confederate flag as if that was not the flag that the KKK, when they first started, the KKK was flying around. They changed the narrative by saying this is the flag is about the South. So that's why we wave the flag now. Black people wave the flag now because it's about the South. That's not what it is about. It's about celebrating what our people went through. So yeah, you got a point there, Pastor.
I am somewhat of a minor league genius. So minor league.
Good topic, gentlemen.
I appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, I mean, let's I have another clip that I want to throw in here because I said we're gonna get to the daughters.
The daughters.
The daughters of the Confederacy. Because to one of Clarice's point, there is an element of sort of people wanting to hold on to that, what they consider to be Southern heritage, Southern culture, whatever. Let's take a look at this clip and we'll come back.
Which chapter?
We are Turner Ashby 184, United Daughters of the Confederacy. I'm Kimberly Mock. I'm the president of the chapter. The last 2 weekends, I've missed memorial services relatively closer to me than this one, Front Royal, and the one in Newmarket prior to that, and because of my kids' soccer. So I thought, I want to see somebody else's before our 6th of June. So I thought I'd come down here, and it's a beautiful campus.
As a Yankee, we generally associate the Confederacy with slavery.
Right, and I understand that, but yes, slavery was a very hot topic back then, I guess you could say, even 20 years prior to that. The war was fought more, states' rights started everything, I feel. The South wanted to do things their way, and the North wanted to control that. And that's basically what fueled the fire for South Carolina to succeed from the Union to begin with.
How do you feel about being in the Union today?
Love it.
Things worked out for the best?
Well, yeah. I mean, who knows what it would be like. Nobody can say it would be better or worse, but it's still a great country.
Good to know. Still a great country.
We don't know what it could have been. It might have been better. But
so, I mean, I didn't even know that there were like Confederate cemeteries, but I guess you just had Confederate soldiers built, buried there. But I heard it.
I've seen them.
Yeah, I've heard of it
in Memphis and going to school in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've actually seen them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So on the one hand, like you kind of get it. Like if you have relatives who fought and died in the Civil War, you're not going to forget. I mean, families, you're not going to forget your relatives,
right?
No matter what they did or whatever you think about it yourself, you're still going to embrace, your great uncle, your great grandfather, whatever. And you're not willing to sort of just throw them away. I think when it comes to the symbolism of it, then you're talking about something different. Like if you want to have a picture of your grandfather in his uniform in your home,
right,
or something of that nature, because you want to remember him, that's different than this. This is not
right,
remembering your This is something completely different. And it's interesting that she said she's wrong. She's right and she's wrong. She said it was a states' rights issue. Again, you had the original compromise in the Constitution with regard to slavery.
right,
This compromise, fugitive slave laws at the federal level. Then you had the compromise of 1820. They tried to continue to maintain the balance of power. So we'll let Missouri in as a slave state, as long as Maine can come in as a free state, so we don't upset the balance of power. 50 years, 30 years later, you had the Kansas-Nebraska thing, where they want to say,
right,
okay, we'll let Kansas in and not Nebraska. Then they had the whole popular sovereignty thing, which is that we'll let the people of the states decide. The people in Nebraska want slavery, they can have it. People in Kansas want slavery, they can have it. And in the preview of the Civil War, what do you think happened? So pro and anti-slavery forces rushed to those states to establish residency so that they could vote against or for it. And it was violence. In the preview of the Civil War, there was violence in Kansas and Nebraska over these same things. Again, eventually, when you keep trying to have these balancing acts, especially if it's over an issue of something that's obviously immoral, like that to actually tell you that slavery is like wrong is evil, but it's necessary evil. Listen, if you play with necessary evil,
right,
you're going to get unnecessary evil very soon. And like I said earlier, the Civil War, from the day they ratified the Constitution, was inevitable. There was no way the South was going to give up that level of political power or their economic status. Their wealth was tied to this. They weren't going to allow themselves to be economically and politically destroyed and have to start all over again. That would have been the right thing to do, but they weren't going to do that. Like they're comfortable. Like you have to think about people and the way that people think and act. I'm comfortable. I'm wealthy. I got all this land. I got slaves. I got political power. I'm just going to just say, whatever.
Right.
Never. And the Civil War was just one compromise too far, and was like the apple cart tipped over, and then you had this violence. With all those.
But I mean, if we fought about whether this was really about states' rights, whether this was about slavery. You're right. I mean, and that can go back and forth, right? And you know what? I'm not sure, even from a historical standpoint, because I think there were a lot of people, even in the South, who really didn't think that slavery was because it was a given. It was kind of assumed. So the issue for them was, you're trying to take our rights, because they didn't really think about the rights of the slaves. I get that.
No,
but I mean, in the end of the day, aren't we still talking about insurrection? Aren't we still talking about a civil war? Aren't we still talking about the losing side, the people who tried to break up the Union? So, whether it's states' rights, whether it's slavery, the question of the monuments, I think, is the issue. What about the idea that, they're your family and we want you to? If I had my uncle was a pimp and I loved him. Listen, nobody can stop me from loving Uncle Snooky. But at the end of the day, the question is going to be, like, is he going to give the commencement speech? I mean, are we going to put a monument? No. You can love him. You love your uncle, because that's history. But I think the history, there's no place that I know of in the world that ever erects a monument to insurrectionists. And I think when we, again, rewrite history, we make heroes out of people who really tried to destroy the Union. And so I think there is where I don't think we're going to get down to what it was really about. Right. I think you're right in terms of what your assessment. But I think we can fight about that forever. What we can't fight about is that these were people who came against the Union.
Well, and I think we talked about this earlier. History does repeat if you don't stop it from repeating.
That's right.
Think about monuments. They built monuments in the South after they lost the Civil War.
After they lost, right?
They lost. Usually in history, the losers don't get to build nothing.
Right.
You get what the winners give you. You build nothing. You dictate nothing. You demand nothing. You keep your mouth shut, and you get what you get. Right? You fought and you lost. That's how it works, right? Everywhere else in human history, you fight, you lose, there are consequences. This is what happened again because the as a country, white people just could not bring themselves to do the right thing when it came to racial equality. So during Reconstruction, what did they start doing? They put black people in charge of cities and made them mayors and city council people and so on and so forth, gave them political power. First thing white people tried to do in the South was take it all
that
back.
Power away.
Take it all back. That's when they put the statues up. Like, we're taking it back. We're taking back the power. We're taking about the political power. We're taking about the KKK shouldn't have lasted 5 days.
Right.
5 days, they should have been completely obliterated. In federal government should have set a whole division down there and said, y'all got 24 hours to disband and we'll just wipe you out. They allowed these things to happen. They allowed these statues to be built. And so before we get too happy with, saying how great the North was and they fought the free slave, they fought this. So remember, though, we have yet another compromise. They didn't learn from compromise of 1820. They didn't learn from 1850. They didn't learn from the Three-Fifths Compromise. They learned nothing because they repeated the same thing over and over again.
Right.
That's why they continue to have to fight for voting rights in the South, and this in the South, and that in the South. Because I guess Grant was the first president. When Grant was the president during Reconstruction, he didn't put his foot down.
Right.
Because there's this part of it when you have a civil war, some of your sympathies are still with the other party, right? That's still like my cousin Jim.
Absolutely.
They were
brothers and cousins on each side.
So we're still family. And the Civil War.
Country. And the idea was that many of the people in the North weren't fighting to free the slaves. That's also the truth. That was actually part of it. It kind of got wrapped into it. But this will also, we got to put the insurrectionists in their place, right? These people who succeeded from the Union, how dare they break this great Union? So some of our views of history and the thought that, like, they swept in to really free the slaves. A lot of ways they were very reluctant in terms of that particular issue. Lincoln was reluctant in terms of that issue. So again, I'm not sure that when we look at what the monuments were designed to do, some of them have to come down to break down what they were designed to do, which was to rewrite history, which was to glamorize insurrectionists and the insurrection, and to make it look like it was not an insurrection, but a glorious, glorious war that their forefathers fought. And it throws everything on its head when you realize that, again, we've got a place where the losers actually get to erect monuments to the leaders of the losing side. I have no idea. I've never seen that anywhere. I've never seen that anywhere in the world. I can't remember where I've seen it anywhere in the world except here. And that really speaks in some ways to our the nation's complicit mindset concerning slaves and race.
And race, because if you're really if it's really abhorrent and it's horrible, you make sure that never happens again. That or nothing like that. And you don't come back and say we're taking back the mayors and the sheriffs stuff. It doesn't happen. Like, they just didn't have the stomach they didn't care enough. They didn't care enough about black people and racism to say we're not doing this again. We just went through this. We just lost tens of thousands of our future. Our sons and uncles and brothers hacked to bits, in fields all across the country. We're not doing that again.
Right.
But they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And they could have done it. They refused.
They wouldn't. That's right.
To do it. Absolutely refused. And it's sad. It's a sad commentary. But you see how, and you see that one was talking about. So then people get to spin the thing about, well, it was a states' rights issue. The North wanted to take away something from the South. It's like, okay. So I mean, the remedy for that wasn't secession. It wasn't the war. The remedy for that was, you fight in your legislatures. You fight in the state legislature. You fight in the federal government. You try to elect people who feel like you do or think like you do.
Right.
The choice isn't, well, let's just go to war and just blow the whole thing up. Well, what's that?
Well, that's why, but listen, that's why I'm saying about the monument. Like, just imagine, the real, as you're going through and you're taking the pictures and you're capturing the monuments and you're putting the slow music behind it as we're reliving the horror of history. But they look so valiant. I mean, they look like Avengers. They look like Marvel heroes, right? I mean, like you can't go into to the Hall of Justice and with slow music, and it's like there's Aquaman and he's in all his glory, and there's Batman and Robin right there. Like it's impossible to make them out to be superheroes with capes, and then it's like. Yeah, and then that was horrible. They shouldn't have done it. Man, look at that hat. I mean, it just seems crazy that if we really want to reconcile with this, there's some things we need to take a wrecking ball to. That we really have to look and say, we were really playing a game here when we allowed the Daughters of the Confederacy and allowed them to erect these monuments and put up placards. Here, this is where they, the great battle happened where they stopped such and such. It was insane. And in order to really be able to look and realize that insanity, don't we need to really get the wrecking ball out and say, let's never forget it, but let's not ever glorify it either?
I think that, I think
the swastika never goes away, right? But like, do we hang it somewhere in Germany to be able to say, listen, this was our past. Let's make sure we put this in the town square. I mean, there's a big, huge building over there. Let's drape it in a swastika so nobody will ever forget the horror. I'm not sure that I can see how that doesn't need to be burned. And we have so many of them in the world. People have them tattooed all over their bodies. We'll never forget it. I'm not sure that the Germans, though, would need to make a monument and say, well, how can we forget? Well, I can tell you right now that there's some ladies over there with tattoos on their arm forearms right now with numbers on it. You won't forget. There's some people still alive, who can still remember, who were kids, who remember the stack of shoes and clothes and teeth that were there. We won't forget. But I don't know that that's the way to remember. And I think that's the thing is we're holding on to these things. There's some things that in this country we need to throw away. In order to start over, we got to start over. And starting over is we got to throw out the monuments to Washington as well. We got to really break down and really take an honest look at Jefferson and be able to really be mature enough to be able to say, great man, but also a man of his time. And that time was not great. Michael Vick, right? Great quarterback. But he was in a time where dog fighting, people fought dogs. It's not a great thing. So I don't know if we want a picture of Michael Vick petting a pit bull, right? And just saying, let's remember, or hold him up, strangling him, right? That's what he did. How horrible. But it's a cool pewter statue. Would we really have that statue up and say, let's put that somewhere else so we can learn from it? So we'll never forget.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that these monuments did. That was the pit bull being killed after the fight, and we made a monument to the guy who did it.
Yeah, I think it becomes somewhat problematic to destroy all the statues. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm saying it's problematic.
Yeah,
because no man or woman could stand the scrutiny required for that statue to remain wherever it is.
Right.
Like there's something in everybody's past, something you did, something you said, that people would say that's got to go. That's got to go. Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he did? With this or that. I think to one of your earlier points, should we be building statues of any human beings and putting them up as if because in a sense you're saying either they're flawless or their flaws are outweighed by their greatness. But their greatness is just so overwhelming that they didn't really have any flaws. Sure, he fought in the rebellion, but did you see his strategy? Did you see where he came in the battlefield? We understand it. One has nothing to do with the other. They could be geniuses and smart. No one's saying Jefferson Davis was an idiot.
Right.
He was saying he fought against his own country. That's what we're saying.
Yes.
That's sort of the divine line. And I did want to get to. We have a little over 5 minutes left. I did want to get to. Okay, let's have a conversation about which one should we take down the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial? Ben Franklin was a slave owner. There's things around it. Should we do away with that? I think either. I'm asking the question. I'm not saying an opinion yet. I'm asking the question: how far should we go? I think it's a question that former President Trump asked, where do we stop, or do we stop?
Well, I think he asked a great question, and I think it never stops. I mean, at the end of the day, it'll never stop. You know, once you build a monument, you're really building it to come down at some point. You don't know it, and your children and your children's children don't know it. But at some point, the sensibilities of the world will change. People are people of their time. You know, I think that we have to give people a break in terms of that. But I think monuments, they don't do that. I think monuments don't allow you to give people a break because it kind of catches them at a moment. And the truth of the matter is, whatever moment you catch them in, their history will catch up with them. And all of us, none of us, the way we live today, what we've done today, the way we think today, what I've said on the internet before, what you have said, all of those things that make sense today, that people give you kudos and me kudos over today, will be scrutinized later, right? We may be looked upon as racist, misogynist, things that we are looked on and said, I mean, did he say that about the transgender community? Did he really say that about gay marriage? So we will be looked at as, so there may be a day that people say, man, Elder Michael Hightower was awesome. In the year 2120, they might be calling for your head. Now, you know, you and I will both be dead, but guess what? As they parse what we say, as they go back and look at what Malcolm X said, as you go back and look at what Martin Luther King said, as you go back and look at what James Baldwin said, there's nothing. All of them were men of their time. Wow, he used the word Negro. You know, as a black man, I don't like Negro. You know, and so the person, I'm not this. I'm a Negro. So I don't want anybody saying Negro. So we get rid of that. So each person is a person of their time. I think we need to give people a break. I think we need to judge in a different way, but I think we need to chill on memorializing flawed people, and that's all of us.
So interesting, because you mentioned MLK, and there is an MLK statue in downtown DC. Did that go too?
Take him down.
Okay.
You know, I really just, because at the end, well, listen, at the end of the day, he's going to have to come down as well. Now, not in my view today, but like there's going to be another view. People will look at his history. People are going to find something that he said. What do you think we're taking schools? Well, wow, this guy was awesome. But we found out he felt like this, and now schools are changing. We got to take his name off of there.
Right.
We got, Pettit Bridge. We can't have that. Right. I mean, he was a racist. Right. But for years, he was like a great man in that area. Aren't we all going to face that scrutiny? Can we? Are any of us above that?
Not if you lived. I mean, not if you've had life and you've lived and what? No, you can't, because we've
Dave Chappelle would be a great comedian today. Right. Dave Chappelle, 25 years from now, people are going to look and say, he took over the mantle for the greats. And he's the man. I guarantee you, another 25 years after that, they'll be ready to cancel Dave Chappelle. As the transgender community continues to grow. The same guy that we hail today that sells out stadiums that Netflix loves, I promise you, he will be hated when another group comes to power and becomes much more dominant and is integrated in our society in a different way. Dave Chappelle, the Chappelle School, nobody, they're going to have to change that sign. Chappelle University, there's no way anybody's going to Chappelle University. Not after what he said. Kanye West, well, we already know Kanye's already sung.
Right. Yeah.
So who's great today is not going to stay great. We might be in a position where we need to just chill on the monuments.
Do we stop at the monuments? Do we go after schools, street signs, community centers?
They're all really just testaments to us. And again, I think we're just in the same place. Eventually, they will be changed.
Some of them already are. They've already taken some of their names off of schools, and people petitioned that have street names changed.
Right.
Yeah.
They'll put Thurgood Marshall somewhere, right? Thurgood Marshall in
Airport.
place of
BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. They're beating the airport after.
At some point, somebody's gonna look up. They'll dig into Thurgood Marshall's. His writing. Wow, he wrote that. He actually said that. And then people say, we got to get Thurgood Marshall's name off of there. So we can do it. Let's keep doing it, but just knowing that they're temporary, just like the Tower of Babel. It can only last for a while before it's going to be destroyed.
That's a good way to look at it. Like, these things are sort of temporary for a time, and then at some time they they do have to. They have to go. They have to go somewhere because, to your point, the people will no longer tolerate those people.
Yes.
Which is anybody, right? Anyone who has a statue built of them, at some point, people are going to say, I don't know what he was thinking.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know what she was doing. She's got to go. So yeah. So I think it's a good way to look at it. Like
we struggle with Moses now. We're like we struggle with Moses. We struggle. I mean, the people in the world. But I mean, he didn't mention slavery at all. I'm not sure if I even like Jesus now. This guy had 3 wives or 4 wives. I mean, he wasn't monogamous. And so even though that was regular at the time, I'm not sure if I can I follow Abraham now that I found out that he had a couple wives. Nobody can stand up to the scrutiny. There's none righteous, no, not one. At the end of the day, our monuments say you're righteous, and they stick you in that time. But none of us can live up and stand up to the scrutiny of humanity.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that is. Yeah, I think it's a human thing. It's a human trait.
Right.
You want to do that. Yeah, even though I think we know. Really in the back of our heads that this can't stand forever because this person just, eventually, like Joe Paterno's statue was moved from Penn State. People never thought that would happen, but he did some things. And he's gone. So, but they're still building statues. And
it's human, right? Tower of Babel, it confounded the languages, but it didn't stop the monument building, right? We've been doing it ever since. Now that we couldn't understand each other. I don't understand why you lift that guy up in China, but either way, we're still, when we spread with that same mindset of building monuments to ourselves and to our righteousness that over time has proven they never stand the test of time. We love for 200 years max.
That's the max.
George Washington's taking a beat now, right? Who would have thought that Thomas Jefferson would be taking a beat now?
Yeah.
But now Sally Hemings. What? You had children. So now all of a sudden people are looking and saying, I'm not sure if I dig this guy anymore. That's going to happen to every single person.
Yeah.
Every minister that's loved today is going to have a time where people say, man, I don't even know how they got saved during that time.
Yeah, that does seem like it's inevitable. Like it's
inevitable.
Yeah,
it's our humanity. Yeah. It's our flaws. Billy Graham is not going to be able to stand up against it.
No, absolutely not. Your prime minister could. Not any real scrutiny, a real examination of everything. Because to your point, like the way people feel about a certain thing may shift one way or the other. Wherever you stand, there'll be people on one side, the other side forever. And at some point, the people against are going to outnumber the people for. Or the people for it, are fighting for it. Like, okay, whatever, take it down. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. Interesting topic. Great conversation. We're actually a little bit over, but man, just really enjoyed this. There's a lot. We said it was a lot. There's a lot. We just really scratched the surface in terms of the history and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Hopefully it'll interest people and they'll go and look up some history and look up some of the things that we talked about, because the history does have a way of, like I said, repeating. And there's some interesting things in the history that sort of inform our todays. Everything that happened then was back in some of the stuff that happened then is still happening now. Just looks different, a little different, but it's sort of the same thing. So hopefully people will do that. We certainly thank everyone who tuned in to watch live. If you tune in later to watch it on our YouTube or Facebook pages, we appreciate that as well. If you want to put a comment, then if you watch it later, that's fine. You don't have to make comments live. We'll respond to your comments. If you put them either on our Facebook or YouTube page, certainly appreciate it. I think Apostle mentioned during Live at 5, we're going to be on some other platforms soon. Bigger presence on TikTok and some other social media platforms. So stay tuned. Some big things are coming, and we hope you stick with us. We'll be back next Wednesday at 7 o'clock with another episode.
That's right.
Thank you for doing it.
And listen, don't forget, like and subscribe. We want you to know when we're coming on. Don't forget to like us. Don't forget to make sure you make a comment and make sure you get connected, because when we're coming out gangbusters, we want you to be with us.
Absolutely. So everyone, enjoy your Thanksgiving. Hope you have a peaceful, restful day. Enjoy your family, and we'll see you next week. Good night, and God bless.
Good night.